To me, Global Reach Out is inspiring.
Is connecting with God, reaching out to the world, and impacting life.
The stories that are shared is so personal and it deeply impacted me.
Global Reach Out to me is reach out to the truth.
Connecting hearts, connecting lives. You're listening to Global Reach Out.
Hello friends, a very warm welcome from Global Reach Out.
Hello everyone. In session 2, I spoke about the sad news that Nehemiah received from his brother regarding the city walls that were left in ruins. In session 3 today, I will speak on Nehemiah's reaction in response to the news. So let me begin by saying this. Nehemiah quickly did something about the sad news. He didn't sit back. He did something about it. Question is, what did he do? What did he do? Now, this is what he did. Nehemiah gave priority to spiritual discipline, and that is to prayer. That's right, you heard me correctly. Prayer. Nehemiah said, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. Now, observe the following of what Nehemiah said. He said, I sat, I wept, for days, mourned, fasted, prayed to the God of heaven. Did you know that on the other hand, Nehemiah could have acted indifferently and responded passively? I mean, he could have given excuses like, well, it's not my business after all. Oh, I'm too busy in my important work. Nothing much can be done because Ezra tried but failed. Don't bother me because, do you know what this means? I have to quit my comfortable job if I were to undertake this rebuilding project. So don't bother me. Or he might say, here am I, Lord, send someone else. It's like the idea of don't rock the boat because rebuilding the city walls could be misrepresented or misinterpreted as rebellion against the king, and many other reasons or excuses he could have given. But he did not. Instead, he decided to make it his business. That's right, his business, by doing something about it. And that's very important as a leader, isn't it? He first went to God in prayer, and in doing so, exemplified the maxim, prayer should not be the last resort, but our first resource. Unlike us, we would have first formed a building committee, fundraising committee, and even consulted the experts, for example, the engineers, about the structural repairs. It is important to take note that Nehemiah was under no obligation to do anything about the ruined walls because he was not responsible. He was not responsible for its ruins, and he was miles away. He was miles away from the scene of action. Had he done nothing? Listen, had he done nothing? No one would blame him. Yet he took the initiative and challenged to rebuild the city walls. But why? Why would he do that? What motivated him to do something about it, take up the task of rebuilding? Well, I believe it was his deep concern for the glory of God's name and for the good, for the welfare of the people. The people had become lethargic, demoralized, and discouraged. What qualifies a man for a task? I would say burden, or a holy discontent, to use Bill Hybels' phrase. This, my friends, is what successful leadership is all about. Nehemiah prayed, as we saw just now. And here's how he prayed to God. He prayed, "O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love Him and keep His commandments. Let your ear be attentive to and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant. Now that I pray before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel, confessing the sins of the people of Israel which we have sinned against you. Both I and my family have sinned. We have offended you deeply, failing to keep the commandments, the statutes, and the ordinances that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses. If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are under the furthest skies, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place at which I have chosen to establish my name. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great power and your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man." That was the prayer of Nehemiah. Nehemiah's prayer, therefore, can be summarized in 5 points. First, he acknowledged who God is. Second, he appealed to God to listen to him. Third, he confessed his sins and of his people. Fourth, he reminded God of his own promise to Israel. Fifth, he asked for divine and human favor. Here are 4 observations that we can make from Nehemiah's prayer. First, his prayer can be called scriptural praying, that is, shaped by biblical quotes commonly known as Deuteronomistic phraseology, because it is filled with scriptural quotations or echoes from other texts. Second, he identified himself with the sins of the people. Third, his prayers were spontaneous and short. The strength of a person's prayer does not depend on its length, but depth. Fourth, Nehemiah prayed because he believed God answers prayers. So, the question is, what happened after Nehemiah prayed? Did God answer his prayer after all? And the answer is, yes, he did. Did you know that it was the king who initiated the conversation and asked Nehemiah why he was so downcast? And Nehemiah replied to the king that he felt a burden to rebuild the city where his ancestors were buried. Now, do you notice that interestingly in the text, Nehemiah was wise enough not to mention Jerusalem, as that would arouse suspicion from the king. Now, more surprisingly, or rather unsurprisingly from the divine perspective, the king took initiative to ask how he could help. And so Nehemiah replied in this manner. He said, "If it please the king, and if you're pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried." The king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked, "How long will you be gone? When will you return?" After I told him how long I would be gone, the king agreed to my request. I also said to the king, "If it please the king, let me have letters addressed to the governors of the province west of the Euphrates River, instructing them to let me travel safely through their territories on my own to Judah. And please give me a travel safety through their territories on my way to Judah. Please give me a letter addressed to Asaph, the manager of the king's forest, instructing him to give me timber, because I will need it to make beams for the gates of the temple fortress, for the city walls, and for a house for myself." What a request, isn't it? The question is, do you think the king granted Nehemiah of all the things he requested? You are right. The king did. But this was just the beginning for Nehemiah, because soon, and very soon, he will face real obstacles and challenges to his leadership. So stay tuned to find out in our next session. Until then, take care and God bless.
And that's this week's episode of the Effective Leadership Program, brought to you by Global Reach Out. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.